There are roads that feel ordinary in daylight, a lane through town, a highway between two familiar places, a turnoff that seems harmless when there is still light in the sky. But at night, in winter, the same road can feel like it belongs to another world. On a Friday evening in Northern California, 5 friends left home for something simple. They were going to watch a basketball game. They had plans for the next day. They had families waiting for them. They had no known reason to vanish. The evening should have ended with the familiar sound of a car pulling into a driveway. Instead, the car would be found days later on a remote mountain road, far from the route home. It was not wrecked. It was not out of gas. It was sitting in the snow, quiet and still, as if the people inside had stepped out for only a moment. But the men were gone. The question was not just where they had gone. It was why they had gone there at all. Why would 5 men, who knew they were expected back, drive deep into the mountains on a freezing winter night? Why would they leave a working car? Why would they walk into the darkness? And why, decades later, does one of them still seem to have disappeared completely? Tonight, we return to February of 1978. We follow the road from Yuba County to Chico, and then away from home, toward the quiet timberland of Plumas National Forest. We do not begin with answers, because in this case, answers have always been the hardest thing to find. Welcome back. Tonight's story is a quiet and unsettling true crime mystery from Northern California. It is often remembered as the case of the Yuba County Five, but we will take our time getting there. This episode is written for calm, nighttime listening. There will be no graphic detail, no sudden shocks, and no sensational retelling. Just the known facts, the people at the center of the story, the landscape around them, and the unanswered questions that still remain. So settle in. Let the room grow still, and picture, for a moment, a winter night in 1978, when 5 friends set out together for a basketball game and never returned home. Yuba County sits in Northern California, in the Sacramento Valley, where wide agricultural land meets the rising country of the Sierra Nevada foothills. In the late 1970s, the area around Marysville and Yuba City was a place of farms, modest neighborhoods, family routines, and long drives between towns. For the 5 men in this story, the world was shaped by family, friendship, work, basketball, and the structure of familiar days. Their names were Ted Weiher, Bill Sterling, Jack Huett, Jack Madruga, and Gary Mathias. They were adults, but in many accounts they were described by relatives with a tender, protective language. Their families often called them the boys, not to diminish them, but because they were loved, watched over, and known closely at home. Each of the 5 had some form of intellectual disability, learning difficulty, or mental health condition. That matters to the case, but it should be handled carefully. They were not symbols. They were not puzzles. They were people. They had personalities, preferences, fears, habits, and friendships. Ted Weiher was 32 years old. He lived with his mother. He was remembered as gentle, steady, and devoted to routine. He had a job and a daily rhythm that mattered to him. People close to him understood that he could struggle with judgment in unfamiliar or stressful situations. But he was also someone who could be trusted with work, with friends, and with the simple responsibilities of life. Bill Sterling was 29. He, too, lived in the orbit of family care and support. He was close to the others and shared their interest in sports. Bill and Jack Huett were often linked together in accounts of the group because they spent time together and moved through the same social circles. Jack Huett, sometimes called Jackie, was 24. He was the youngest of the group. He was shy, gentle, and attached to his family. Like Ted, he was someone whose limitations could make certain situations difficult, especially if the environment became confusing or frightening. Jack Madruga was 30. He was a military veteran, and he owned the car the group used that night, a 1969 Mercury Montego. Jack was considered by many to be the most independent of the group. He could drive. He was careful with his car. He was not known as someone who took foolish risks with it. That detail would later become important, because the car would end up in a place that seemed deeply out of character. And then there was Gary Mathias. Gary was 25. He had served in the army and had a history of mental health struggles, including treatment for schizophrenia. By 1978, according to accounts from the time, he was receiving outpatient treatment and was functioning well enough that some who knew his care described him as a success story. He worked with his stepfather in a gardening business and was close to the other men. Gary is often treated as the most mysterious figure in this case, partly because he was the only one who was never found. But it is important not to turn that absence into suspicion without evidence. Being missing is not the same as being guilty. Having a psychiatric history is not evidence of wrongdoing. The five friends were connected through a program often described as Gateway Projects, a community program that offered activities and support for people with developmental disabilities and related needs. Basketball was a central part of their lives. They played together, practiced together, and were looking forward to an important game of their own. That detail gives the night its ordinary shape. On Friday, February 24th, 1978, the five men planned to attend a college basketball game at California State University, Chico. Chico was not next door, but it was not an unreasonable trip. It was roughly 50 miles from their home area, a drive that could be made in an evening. The next day, the men were expected to play in a Special Olympics basketball tournament. They were excited about it. Their families knew they had plans. There were uniforms ready. There were expectations. There was every reason to come home. Before leaving, some of the men made small choices that would later haunt the families. They did not take heavy coats suitable for mountain weather. They did not pack for a long trip. They did not behave like people planning to be gone overnight. They were going to a basketball game. They were going to return. That is one of the quiet sorrows of this case. So much of it begins with normal life. A planned outing, a car ride, friends together, a game in a college gym, snacks after the game. The ordinary small details that happen before a story turns. They drove to Chico in Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego. They watched the game. Afterward, they stopped at a convenience store or a market where they bought snacks and drinks. That stop is important because it places them in Chico after the game. It shows they were alive, together, and apparently following the expected path of an evening out. From there, the logical route would have taken them south, back toward Yuba County. Instead, the Mercury eventually appeared far to the east and north, on a mountain road in Plumas National Forest. There are mysteries where one fact is strange. In this case, nearly every fact after Chico seems to ask another question. In many true crime cases, the crime itself is clear. There is an attack, a disappearance, a confirmed act of violence, a known offender, or at least a known scene. The Yuba County Five case is different. It is a missing persons case. It is a death investigation. It is sometimes discussed as a possible case of foul play, but no one has ever proved exactly what crime, if any, occurred. The central event is this. Five men left Chico after a basketball game, and they never made it home. Their families noticed quickly. These were not men who simply disappeared for days without explanation. They had routines. They had people expecting them. They had a basketball tournament the next day. When they did not return, worry came fast. Search efforts began along the likely route from Chico back toward Yuba County. But the expected route did not reveal them. Then, several days later, a Forest Service ranger reported seeing a car in the mountains. It was Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego. The car was found on Oroville-Quincy Road in Plumas National Forest, far from where the men should have been if they were driving home. The location was remote, cold, and covered in winter conditions. Snow lay across the mountain road. The area was not a casual detour for men dressed for town. Inside the car were signs of the evening they had just lived, programs from the basketball game, wrappers and containers from the snacks they had bought, a map, reportedly folded neatly, but no men, no simple explanation. The car itself deepened the mystery. It was not found destroyed. It had not crashed. It was not empty of fuel. Accounts have long noted that it was in working order, and investigators believed it may have been possible to move it from where it was stuck. That mattered because Jack Madruga was known to be protective of his car. Those close to him could not easily imagine him abandoning it unless something felt urgent, frightening, or impossible. The car's position suggested it had become stuck in snow or soft conditions. But the question remained, why was it there in the first place? To reach that road, the men had moved away from the normal path home. They had gone into higher country, toward a place that would have been colder, darker, and less forgiving. There were theories, even early on. Maybe they had taken a wrong turn. Maybe they had decided to go for a drive. Maybe they were following someone. Maybe they were frightened. Maybe someone had forced or tricked them. Maybe there was a misunderstanding that became dangerous only because of the weather and the isolation. But each theory has problems. A wrong turn might explain a few miles. It does not easily explain the distance, the direction, and the persistence required to keep driving into the mountains. A spontaneous drive seems unlikely because the men were expected home and had an important game the next day. Following someone is possible, but no one has ever identified a person they were following. Fear is possible, but the source of that fear remains unknown. And force is possible, but there was no clear evidence of the car showing a struggle. The mountain gave almost nothing back. Searchers faced difficult weather. Snow made the landscape hard to read. Tracks could vanish. Evidence could be buried. Human scent, footprints, dropped items, and subtle signs of movement could all be hidden beneath winter. There was also the simple danger of the environment itself. A person leaving a car in those conditions might quickly become disoriented. Roads and trees can look alike in darkness. Snow changes the shape of the land. A distance that seems manageable from inside a vehicle can become exhausting on foot. The men were not dressed for a long winter walk. They did not have a plan for survival, and yet, at some point, they left the mercury behind. It is one of the most important images in the case. A car stopped in the snow, doors closed, the night around it quiet, and 5 figures gone into the darkness. For months, that was nearly all the families had. A missing car, a mountain road, no answers. Then the snow began to melt. The first phase of the investigation focused on finding the men alive. That hope faded over time, but it did not disappear all at once. Families often live in layers of hope. First, they hope for a phone call, then a sighting, then a mistake, then a rescue, then any answer at all. In the weeks after the disappearance, law enforcement followed leads. Reports came in from people who thought they had seen one or more of the men. Some sightings were far away, some were vague. Most could not be confirmed. 2 reported accounts became especially important. The first involved a man named Joseph Shones. He later told investigators that he had been on the same mountain road on the night the men disappeared. According to reports, he had driven up to check conditions near a cabin or planned recreation area and became stuck in the snow. He was unwell and believed he was having serious chest pain or a heart-related episode. While he remained in his vehicle, he said he saw lights and heard voices nearby. He reportedly called out for help, but according to his account, the lights went out and the voices stopped. Later, he said he saw people around the area and perhaps a vehicle. His account has been repeated for decades because, if accurate, it could place other people near the same road around the same time. But like so much in this case, it does not settle the matter. Shones was in distress. It was dark. The area was remote. His memory and perception may have been affected by pain, fear, cold, or confusion. Still, investigators took the account seriously enough that it remains part of the public story. There was also another reported sighting involving a woman who believed she saw the men at a store after the time they were supposed to be heading home. Some versions of the case describe a red pickup truck or another vehicle in connection with suspicious possibilities. These details have circulated widely, but the stronger the retelling becomes, the more careful we have to be. A case like this attracts theories. Theories can preserve attention, but they can also blur the line between documented fact and repeated rumor. The documented center remains unchanged. 5 men went missing after the game. Their car was found in the mountains, and the later discoveries did not explain why they were there. In June of 1978, more than 3 months after the disappearance, the Thaw made deeper searches possible. A group of motorcyclists came upon a Forest Service trailer in the Plumas National Forest area, about 19 or 20 miles from where the mercury had been found. The trailer was meant for seasonal or work use. It was not a home, but it offered shelter. Inside, searchers found Ted Weiher. He was in the trailer, on a bed, wrapped in sheets. Investigators believed he had survived for a significant period after the night of the disappearance, perhaps weeks and possibly much longer. His death was attributed to starvation and exposure-related conditions. The details of the trailer are among the most painful and confusing in the entire case. There was food nearby. Some military-style ration cans had been opened and eaten, but other food supplies, enough to sustain people for a much longer time, were reportedly left untouched in a storage area. There were matches and materials that could have been used for warmth. There were heavier clothes nearby. There was a heating system that may have been usable if the right tank or valve had been accessed. And yet, Ted died there. To say that plainly is heartbreaking. To understand it is much harder. It is possible that the men did not understand what was available. It is possible they were frightened to enter locked or unfamiliar storage areas. It is possible that injury, exhaustion, cold, cognitive limitations, or mental distress prevented them from making decisions that might seem obvious from the safety of a warm room decades later. Survival is not just about supplies. It is about knowing they are there, knowing they are safe to use, knowing how to use them, having the strength to reach them, having the judgment to keep trying. The trailer suggested that at least one other person had been there with Ted. Gary Mathias' shoes were reportedly found inside, while Ted's shoes were missing. This led to one of the case's enduring possibilities, that Gary may have left the trailer wearing Ted's shoes, perhaps because his own feet were injured, or because he needed different footwear. But that is not a confirmed answer. It is an inference. It is one of many shadows in the story. Searchers then found remains of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling along the road between the car and the trailer. They were found some distance from the mercury, but not all the way to the trailer. Their deaths were generally understood in relation to exposure and the harsh conditions. Jack Huett was found later, in a wooded area not far from the trailer, after his father joined the search. That detail is especially tender. A parent, still looking, still hoping for something more, finding the evidence that ended one kind of uncertainty and began another. 4 families received devastating answers. One family did not. Gary Mathias was not found. No confirmed trace of him has ever resolved the question of where he went after the car, after the mountain road, and perhaps after the trailer. For investigators, the discoveries created a rough path. The men left the car. Some, or all of them, traveled many miles through snow and mountain darkness. At least some reached the trailer. Ted survived there for a time. Gary may have been there. Jack Huett may have gotten near the trailer. Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling died along the route. But the shape of that path is not the same as the reason for it. Why did they abandon the car? Why did they keep moving? Why did they not turn back? Why did they not use more of the supplies? Why was Gary never found? Those questions are the heart of the case. The investigation never found a suspect. It never established a clear act of violence. It never proved that the men were forced into the mountains. But it also never proved that they went there willingly in any ordinary sense. That is why the case remains so haunting. It sits between categories. It is not a simple accident. It is not a solved crime. It is not a confirmed murder case. It is a disappearance, a survival mystery, and a possible foul play case all at once. The Yuba County Five case remains unresolved because every explanation leaves something behind. The first possibility is that the men simply became lost. This is the most practical theory on the surface. They may have taken a wrong turn after leaving Chico. Roads at night can be confusing. In 1978, there were no phones with maps, no GPS voice giving corrections, no instant way to reroute. A driver could make one mistake, then another, and continue onward, hoping the road would eventually make sense. But this theory struggles with distance and direction. The men did not just miss a driveway. They ended up far from the expected route home, on a mountain road, in winter conditions. Jack Madruga knew his car and was careful with it. Their families found it difficult to believe he would willingly drive deep into snowy mountain country without a reason. The second possibility is panic. Perhaps something happened after the game that frightened them. Maybe they were followed. Maybe they believed they were in danger. Maybe a confrontation occurred that has never been documented. This could explain why they kept driving away from home. It could also explain why they left the car. Fear can make people choose strange routes. It can make a working car feel unsafe. It can turn a road into a trap and the woods into an escape. But there is no confirmed source of panic, no known enemy, no verified confrontation, no physical evidence at the car proving an attack. The third possibility is coercion. Someone could have directed them into the mountains, either by threat, deception, or pressure. The men may have been especially vulnerable to manipulation because of their disabilities and trust in others. This theory is often discussed because it seems to answer the question of why they would go somewhere so unlikely. But again, there is no identified person, no confession, no clear witness, no evidence showing that another driver led them there or forced them out of the car. The fourth possibility is that one of the men influenced the others. Some people have speculated about Gary Mathias because he had a history of mental illness and because he was never found. But this idea must be treated with caution. Mental illness does not make a person violent or responsible for a mystery. Gary was reportedly doing well in treatment at the time. There is no proven evidence that he harmed anyone or intentionally led the group into danger. It is possible that any member of the group suggested a route, misunderstood a road, or made a decision that others followed. But possible is not proven. The fifth possibility is a chain of small mistakes. This may be the quietest theory, and in some ways the saddest. No villain, no single dramatic moment, just a wrong road, a stuck car, cold weather, limited judgment under stress, and a group of men trying to survive in a place they did not understand. They leave the car because they think help is nearby. They walk because staying feels wrong. They keep moving because turning back feels impossible. Some become exhausted, some separate, some reach the trailer. Supplies are present, but not used fully. One man survives for a while, another leaves, and the mountain keeps the rest. This theory fits some facts, but it still does not answer the first question cleanly. Why were they there? That is the locked door at the center of the case. The Forest Service trailer adds another layer. Inside and around it were things that could have helped. Food, possible heat, clothing, materials, shelter. It is easy, from a distance, to ask why they did not use everything available. But the humane answer is that we do not know what condition they were in. They may have been physically weakened. They may have been afraid of taking items that did not belong to them. They may not have understood what was stored nearby. They may have lacked the tools, strength, or confidence to access supplies. They may have been waiting for rescue and rationing what they understood. And Ted, alone, or nearly alone, may have spent his final weeks in a narrow world of cold, hunger, confusion, and hope. That is not a scene to sensationalize. It is a scene to hold gently. The families were left not just with grief, but with contradictions. Their sons and brothers had done something that seemed unlike them. They had gone somewhere they should not have gone. They had survived longer than anyone first imagined, and still, the full story remained out of reach. Gary Mathias's disappearance keeps the case open in a special way. If he left the trailer alive, where did he go? Did he try to find help? Did he become disoriented and vanish into the forest? Was he picked up by someone? Did he survive for a time elsewhere? No confirmed evidence has answered those questions. For decades, people have searched maps, timelines, newspaper archives, and witness statements, trying to arrange the facts into a shape that finally makes sense. But the case resists. It is remembered not because nothing is known, but because what is known seems to point in several directions at once. A basketball game, a snack stop, a wrong road, a car in the snow, a long walk, a trailer with supplies, 4 men found, 1 man missing, and a silence that has lasted since 1978. The story of the Yuba County Five is often described as strange, baffling, or eerie. And it is. But beneath the mystery is something more human. 5 families loved 5 men. They knew their habits, their limitations, their joys, their routines. They knew who liked basketball, who needed reminders, who was proud of work, who was careful with a car, who was looking forward to tomorrow. That is what makes the case so painful. The men did not vanish from nowhere. They vanished from ordinary life. They vanished from a Friday night that should have ended at home. In the years since, the case has gathered comparisons and nicknames. Some have called it an American Dyatlov Pass, because of the remote winter setting and the unanswered questions. But comparisons can only go so far. This was not a legend. It was not a campfire tale. It was 5 real men from Yuba County. Ted Weiher, Bill Sterling, Jack Huett, Jack Madruga, Gary Mathias. Ted, Bill, Jack Huett, and Jack Madruga were found, though not in time to bring them home alive. Gary was not found at all. The mountain road still exists in memory as the place where the known world ended. The Mercury Montego, sitting in snow, remains one of those images that true crime history cannot quite release. It asks a quiet question. What would make them leave? The Forest Service trailer asks another. What happened there in the weeks after? And Gary's absence asks the last. Where did he go? There may be an answer somewhere, but if there is, it has never fully surfaced. It may be buried in snowmelt and distance. It may have passed with a witness who never understood what they saw. It may rest in a decision made in fear on a dark road, by men trying to do the best they could in conditions that were far beyond them. Sometimes, an unsolved case remains unsolved, not because there are no clues, but because the clues do not speak the same language. A car says one thing, a road says another, a trailer says another. The families say they would not have done this. The forest says nothing. So tonight, we leave the case where it has rested for decades, not solved, not forgotten, not turned into myth, just held carefully, as a story of 5 friends, one winter night, and a road that led away from home. Thank you for listening. Tonight's case was the 1978 disappearance of the Yuba County Five. As always, this story was told with respect for the people involved and the families who lived with the unanswered questions. Rest well, and when you are ready, I'll be here with another quiet, true crime story for sleep.